Alright, let's go back to the beginning. No, not that. Yes. The first time we see Peter put on his iconic black suit was during Secret Wars, when his classic suit was damaged. At the time, he was unaware that the suit was a living being, or how it would later be known, a symbiote. In The Amazing Spider-Man issue 252, Spider-Man goes back to Earth after Secret Wars. And while doing his regular duties as friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, he discovers that he's got an insane boost in stats. He moves faster, his strikes are much more powerful, and his senses were sharper, which in turn made him much more aggressive during combat. The issue starts when Peter notices that he's heavily tired during the day, later discovering that the symbiote was taking control during his sleep. In The Amazing Spider-Man issue 258, after experiencing the black versus classic costume nightmare, Peter turns to Reed Richards, who reveals the true nature of the suit. So Mr. Fantastic takes it off and Peter goes back to his regular suit. In Web of Spider-Man, the symbiote finds its way back to Peter's closet and bonds with him again. Peter later uses the bells ringing in Our Lady of Saints Church to take it off forcefully before it bonds with Eddie Brock. The Black Suit story arc would later be readapted into various forms of media and even further comical releases. Each entry would tweak it a little bit to the point where the suit becomes, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, a metaphor for addiction. So instead of a mere boost in stats or just a parasite causing insomnia, the black suit has become a symbol of isolation, degrading mental health, and even toxicity. In Web of Shadows, the black suit, in this case being purple, is associated with the evil decisions of the game, whether Peter keeps giving into it or not, and that remains up to the player. The animated series explores Peter's heightened aggression towards everybody. He only takes it off when he realizes that he was about to kill Shocker. In The Spectacular Spider-Man, which is my personal favorite, aside from symptoms already explored in previous media, it forces Peter to push his friends away and isolate himself. Only when Uncle Ben's image in Peter's psyche appears to support him and remind him of who he really is will he finally manage to overcome it. All of this sums up that throughout the history of Peter's relationship with the black suit, there are two factors that allowed him to fight back: his strong sense of morality and his love for his friends. Now, how does all of that fit in Marvel's Spider-Man story? And with everything we know about the black suit so far, did Spider-Man 2 handle the story arc well? To answer these two questions, we need to take a look at arguably one of the best Spider-Man missions I have ever played in any of the games.
Anything can be broken.
The first thing I wanted to mention is that it parallels with the mission The One That Got Away, where you fight Martin Lee in the first game. At this point in the series, there is a recurring plot structure when it comes to villains. First, introduce a terrifying villain, second, have us fight and overcome the villain at the end of the game's penultimate act, and then reveal the real villain of the game with whom you're going to have the final showdown. And this is likely going to be the case for the third game, which is okay because the formula works. Now, despite the criticism against Spider-Man 2's story, it is safe to say that the game is filled with amazing moments. Fighting Sandman, chasing the Lizard, fighting the Lizard, Venom vs. Kraven, the anti-Venom suit, the final fight, so on and so forth. But those moments are only regarded as great when taken separately, not as components of a plot. Plot doesn't require a rush of set pieces, but requires build-up, pacing, and catharsis, which is why a lot of gamers might label the game's plot as a mess instead of a masterpiece. Now, I'm not here to talk about what worked and what didn't in Spider-Man 2's story, as much more interested people than I am have dealt with this. Instead, I am more interested in the ending of the game's second act. By the way, I know that some of you might treat the follow-up mission, Don't Be Scared, as the ending of Act 2, which is valid. However, the separation of acts is based on Peter's bondage with the black suit, so the following structure made much more sense. At least to me. But anyways, back to the mission. Anything Can Be Broken stands out because it combines bombastic comic book action and highly emotional and compelling narrative value. And to understand why it clicked as a plot point, we need to take a look at all the build-up that led to the clash of the story's important players, and how such a collision of character arcs would unfold, and what it all meant for the game's real hero: you. Spider-Man 2 starts with the knowledge that Peter has suffered a terrible loss at the end of the first game, besides the fact that he is jobless and practically clueless about what to do next in his life. But more than that, Peter has been struggling with an idea that resides at the core of every Spider-Man story: the responsibility to save everyone, failing to realize that his power doesn't allow him to be there for everyone all at once. Also, the concept of responsibility would require him to sacrifice personal priorities. Think of it when you're trying to maintain multiple jobs or personal relationships. For us regular people, this is entirely natural. But for Peter, for someone who's been convinced that he should be able to handle the world, he instead ends up blaming himself for all the inconsistencies in his life. Whether we're talking about his relationship with MJ, his friendship with Harry, his mentorship of Miles, or his life as good old Spider-Man. Peter is always at the center of his own criticism, never shying away from declaring so in the game, which is why a lot of people would assume that he was nerfed, and you really can't argue with that. The symbiote arc across the different Spider media allows Peter to handle the chaos in his life, transcending his limitations, physical, mental, and even moral. Symbiote Peter cares about Peter only and will no longer take lightly to anything that can undermine him. In return, he's strong enough to quote-unquote save everyone and capable enough to handle other aspects of his life and even sleep while the suit does all the work. The symbiote allows Peter to be a better Spider-Man, even if it means leaving chaos behind or disregarding the feelings of others. By the time we get to Anything Can Be Broken, this is peak symbiote Peter. His costume changed, his voice changed, and his physical abilities are enhanced to the maximum. This is a Spider-Man who doesn't joke around, and more importantly, someone who doesn't hold back. Besides, Peter seems to have been given a chance to save someone in comparison to how he has failed to do so prior to that moment. The obligation to save Miles didn't stem from the symbiote's appreciation for him or Ryu's insistence, but from Peter's ingrained feel of failure mixed with the symbiote's rageful pride not to be stepped over by their enemies. I mean, this really sums it up. Now, let's talk about Miles. Miles' situation is actually quite similar to Peter's. He too suffered a terrible loss in the first game, which would define his life as Spider-Man. He is always reminded of his father's motto, a hero is someone who doesn't give up. And thus Miles assumes that persona, which was actually a lot more obvious in his own game. Speaking of which, Finn's death has also left a major impact on him. The responsibility of saving everyone is a concept Miles struggles with as well. Also, while looking up to Peter, and while being exposed to what Peter is supposed to struggle with in his personal life, he assumes that if Peter could do it, he could do it too, failing to realize that Peter couldn't do it. It's actually understandable because no one wants to be told that their mentor has limitations, and Miles at that point in the game was not mature enough to understand that. Besides, when struck with Scorpion's poison, Miles hallucinates that he wasn't able to save his loved ones, an effect that would drive him throughout the first half of the game while chasing Martin Lee. Unconsciously, it seems that Miles would justify executing Lee as an act of preservation of his loved ones instead of just revenge. Of course, Miles overcomes that, and his ability to look past his need for revenge is what kickstarted Anything Can Be Broken in the first place. I've always liked to believe that if not for the encounter with Lee, Miles would not have been able to have the mental clarity to save his mentor. And if you think about it, Miles doesn't fight Peter out of a need to prove that he's a capable Spider-Man or even a better one. Miles loved Peter and genuinely cared about him, the same way that he cares about his mother or Genki or Haley. But enough about Miles for now, let's talk about the one who orchestrated the whole thing, Sergei Kravenov, otherwise known as Kraven the Hunter. Kraven has all the characteristics that make him an upper-class villain. He's a powerful big-game hunter with years of experience, he is wealthy, and he's insanely resourceful. And for a 69-year-old, he moves like he's still in his 20s. But what really makes Kraven different than any other villain, at least in this specific iteration of the character, is his motive. He's not driven by fortune, personal vendetta, or mania, which is the case for most of Spider-Man's villains. Instead, Kraven wages war against mortality itself, or better yet, the meaningless and easily forgettable kind. Diagnosed with inoperable cancer, Kraven leaves his home and family behind and readies himself for his final hunt, where he is supposed to finally meet his end, which would fit the kind of lifestyle he led. To do that, him and his army establish multiple bases of operation throughout the city, using vast weaponry and implementing advanced technology, with the single intent of tracking and finding his final hunt. Throughout the first and second act of the game, Kraven ends up causing so much damage, starting with provoking Sandman and going after his family, killing Shocker, Electro, Vulture, and Scorpion, going after Black Cat, bringing back the Lizard, and even killing Peter. Kraven was coming for everything, and it only took him a short period of time to turn New York into his own personal hunting ground, even with 2 Spider-Man on board. Besides, the fact that Kraven only saw the world through the dichotomy of hunter and prey rid him of any moral boundaries, which meant that he had no issues with torturing and killing innocents just to attract and hunt his prey. This is exactly the kind of villain that both Spider-Man feared, a haunting threat acting as a reminder that they can't save everyone. Such an impact served as a force that pushed Peter over the edge. At this point, it was as if giving in to the whims of the symbiote was a circumstantial necessity instead of a choice. So to recap, Peter believed that his old self couldn't keep up with this kind of danger. Therefore, becoming a better Spider-Man was the only way to defeat Kraven and save everybody. Miles believed that Peter was losing himself in the name of necessity, and he was not about to let his mentor turn into another Finn, no matter the cost. Kraven believed that he deserved nothing less than a fitting end to his long saga of the hunt, and at last he had finally found the proper foe. 3 key players participating in a vicious battle, where anything can be broken. The first thing to point out is the location of the fight. It takes place within Kraven's mansion, just like the fight with Martin Lee in No Escape, so we should be familiar with it. However, the fact that it takes place during the night creates a whole different vibe. The area is practically designed to hunt Spider-Man, reflecting deep preparation. Kraven had Miles placed in a cell where Peter can see him, using him as a motive. Placing Peter within the unbreakable cage was both a test and a warm-up. Kraven wanted to make sure that Spider-Man was prepared to kill him, and angering him enough would hinder any possibility from holding back. As for the field where the action takes place, it is highly spaced out, allowing Kraven to use ranged attacks, pushing Spider-Man to chase after him instead of dodging all the time as part of his usual strategy. And during the second phase, Kraven, being the experienced hunter, doesn't shy away from cheating by using the bell from the church or calling the robot dogs for support. He hides within trees and attempts to shoot at you, forcing you again to chase after him from place to place. The fight literally fueled aggression. Even though the old hunter was dying expecting defeat, he would not deliver it easily to Spider-Man. Only when Peter stops holding back and overpowers him will he give in and allow the symbiote to strangle him. And then Miles intervenes, and this is where the whole tone of the fight changes. The space that was once Kraven's domain turns into Peter's domain, with the symbiote spreading all over the place. Then both Miles and the player are tasked with removing the symbiote from Peter, which means that he would have to fight his mentor, and you would have to fight your childhood hero. Now, I gotta say, being given the chance to fight Spider-Man as Spider-Man and winning while doing so was actually pretty cool. Yet, I have a theory. Peter without the black suit would have overpowered Miles easily. The regular Peter would not rush towards danger without strategizing on how to minimize damage or ensure victory. He calculates weaknesses, uses gadgets efficiently, and channels his senses in the right direction. However, Symbiote Peter believes he doesn't need to do all of that. His confidence in his own power blinds him of all the possible ways his enemies could actually defeat him. This allowed Miles to follow in the footsteps of the real Peter by focusing on a smarter approach that exploits the Black Suit's greatest weakness, inflated ego. That's why he eventually wins. Well, aside from the fact that you are behind the controller, which made me think, what does this whole thing mean for the player? I mean, if you think about it, the end of the symbiote arc could have been handled with a cutscene or a simple QuickTime event. But no, you had to be the one to save Peter. Not only that, but you had to fight tooth and nail to do it. Every blow you've dealt, every parry you've executed, every web you've shot, every ability and gadget you've used, every time you've rung the bell, it was all backed up by tremendous emotional weight. Up to that point, you are fully aware of everything Peter has gone through. You clearly realize that he's at a very low point in his life, and you are the one tasked with bringing him back. And if you're a longtime fan, you're not only thinking about the events of the game, but about everything Peter has struggled with throughout the entirety of his history as an iconic character. This is you not giving up on someone you love, even if they give up on themselves. Which is actually the whole message of the game. It is as if Insomniac is telling us that Peter doesn't only need Miles, MJ, or Harry, but he needs you too, and luckily for him, you didn't disappoint. Of course, we all know that Peter's story with the symbiote doesn't end there. A part of it remains within him, and his mental health doesn't get any better. If anything, it got even worse, which acts as its own build-up towards the reveal of the anti-venom suit. Still, anything can be broken felt like the peak of the story, which is why the whole of Act 3 may have felt a little off, even though it does connect with themes from the beginning of the game. Well, like I said, this isn't what the video is about. What I can tell you though, is that whatever you felt about the last act of the game, it's mainly related to anything can be broken, which says a lot about its appeal to the player. It's a mission every Spider-Man fan can connect with at a deeper level, a mission where everyone, including you, was fighting back. Thank you so much for watching this video. What do you think about the mission? Or better yet, what's your opinion on the game's plot? Do you think Insomniac did a good job with the Black Suit storyline, at least in comparison to other media? Make sure to tell me all about it in the comments below. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.